Hello and welcome back to Unfazed Under Fire. I'm your host, David Craigots, the Resilient Leadership Guy. And again, as I've said many times, our stand on this show is that human beings have all the resourcefulness they need within them to rise above and address the biggest challenges we face and to do so with grace. Now, the first step to tapping into this inner resourcefulness, which is your birthright, comes from recognizing that leading and living are inside-out journeys and experiences. That in a sense, the world you see out there is a projection of your consciousness. Now, this is not just me saying this. Neuroscience has already proven this is the case. And when I say that, and when neuroscience says that, it's not saying that there aren't people and objects and events out there. Obviously, that's true. What the research has shown is that we don't see the world as it is, but rather we interpret it as it is. That's why leadership is so important, because true leaders realize it is through their vision they are crafting a new reality, not simply trying to control others and events to form to their vision. Thus, leadership is inherently creative. And again, when you realize this, things become much more interesting and inspiring. Now, on today's show, I welcome back Anatoly Yakorev to the show to discuss the underpinnings of this critical understanding of the inside-out journey of leadership development. In short, we want to provide more meat on the bone by zeroing in on defining what we call self-leadership. How do we know when self-leadership is being engaged? The process of developing it, and why its continued development is so essential, no matter how senior or experienced you become in your role as an executive. Now, for those who are just being introduced to Anatoly for the first time, Anatoly brings a very rich background that includes having worked for over 25 years as a cross-cultural consultant at BP Amoco. So he understands firsthand the pressures of what it means to be in the executive suite. Over the next 25 years, following his days at BP Amoco, Anatoly served as an ethics and compliance consultant. And now he and I are working together, and I'm very honored to be working with him to focus on helping enlightened leadership rapidly expand a world that is yearning for it. The voices are growing louder and louder out there, asking for leaders to show up who can bring us together rather than divide us, and who genuinely care to improve the quality of life on this planet for everyone, rather than just having a few benefit. So I want to welcome you back to the show, Anatoly. It's great to have you back and on this important subject today.
Thanks for having me again, David.
Appreciate it. So I'm going to set a little context, as I usually do for the show. And in our last show with you, which was my first podcast of 2024, we discussed the power and success of the Resilient Leader method that you and I have co-developed over the last 2 years. And as a quick reminder for our listeners, the Resilient Leader method combines two components: the leadership resilience reset process that, in short, resets one's nervous system to close to original factory settings. So imagine having the nervous system you had when you were 8, 9, and 10 years old, before life had its way with you. So this means that following the reset, the executive is cleared of any accumulated emotional junk from life, including key traumas they may have experienced. Now, this reset is followed with a leadership resilience coaching program that supports executives to integrate their new experience post-reset and learn to effectively engage this new version of themselves in their leadership role. So in short, the Resilient Leader method process instantly generates what we call military-grade resilience for executives, and supports them to maximize the benefits of this reset and support generating greater value in their roles. And if awakening to higher level resilience isn't enough, given the times we find ourselves in, clients are also consistently reporting other benefits from doing the reset, including about a 30+% increase in focus, energy, and creativity, and a 40% or more increase in self-confidence. Further, we're seeing a 50% increase in tangible success in various results that these executives must generate in their roles. And finally, and I have to give a shameless plug about this, because we have actually seen a 100% success rate in that every executive who has been through this process has reported similar results. So today we want to speak about what the resilient leader method is really bringing forward in these clients, which is a rapid blossoming of an entirely new level of self-leadership. And the igniting of self-leadership is foundational to any executive who wants to lead teams and organizations at a higher level. And this is what we want to, why I brought Anatoly back to talk about this. So the development of self-leadership has been a primary focus of my work for 24 years before I met Anatoly, and was very shortly after we started working together, we realized that the reset process that he brings is putting executives on what I would call kind of self-leadership development rocket ship that happens very, very quickly in their experience. So Anatoly, I thought we would start today by defining what we mean by self-leadership. And why don't you start sharing what your point of view is on what that is?
Thank you, David. I would like to actually start with saying that the whole concept of self-leadership has been out there, especially in my area of business ethics and compliance, because the pressure has been building steadily on leaders to demonstrate the kind of quality as of stewardship and servant leadership. And that's been bubbling sort of like aside from executive coaching development, but nevertheless, there's a lot of expectations have been created for executives. And they found that to be quite challenging, because one of the key components for any self-leadership lies in the ability to lead others from the heart and be connected very deeply with themselves, to be able to become of service to others. And yes, it sounds sort of like fluffy, and because there's a lot that has been written on the subject, but at the same time, as we go and we'll look at the quality of the self-leadership component, it actually has more value for the person who abides by the principle of self-leadership. Not to talk much about the ripple effect that it creates for the teams, but the fact that self-leadership is deeply rooted and helps bring together other components like, creativity, clarity, confidence, centeredness, and then last but not the least, the qualities that a leader espouses to have and actually is able to project onto others in his leadership style. So that's why, we're talking about an approach that covers a lot of ground, yet ultimately goes back to how we connect to ourselves, within ourselves, in that search to bring out the greatness in us.
Yeah, that's so true. I really like what you said about, it is truly, this is what we mean by an inside out journey. So the more you understand what you are mastering within yourself to be more effective in life, and when you start digging down into that question of how can I be more effective, what you're pointing to is that there is already qualities that exist within us that if we understand how to uncover them, like clarity, creativity, confidence, centeredness, presence, persistence, the ability to engage people in a conversation where we are deeply, truly listening, so that we can be creative together. Those things are available to us. And it's almost like the image I like is the block of granite. The sculpture is in the block of granite. It's not so much about creating the sculpture. It's about chipping away everything that is not the sculpture. And that's really, I think, a great metaphor for the journey of self-leadership, is chipping away at those things that keep us from having that clarity, that natural creativity, that natural confidence that every human being has available within themselves. And yet, because we did not know this, we didn't know that there was this part of ourselves. Nobody told us this when we grew up. We kind of allowed other people to direct us and allowed experiences and our interpretation of those experiences and traumas to form to cover up all those natural traits, right? So given that definition or that view of leadership, what does it look like when self-leadership is fully actualized in a person, when a person is truly leading from this internal self of theirs, and they're dealing with being an executive, moving forward in their organizations to try to make things happen? What does that look like behaviorally when it's activated in your mind, when you've seen that activated in people?
Well, it's interesting because when executives understand that there is a certain authority that they step into and they expect it to act given, their responsibilities and their authority, which is, it's the outside, that level of external authority that they, have to work with. Whereas we're talking about with the self-leadership, it's being like reclaiming your personal authority, your self-authority. So therefore, that opens up a completely new dimension of how much you can apply yourself and your role, and how much you can claim from your ability to connect with yourself and connect with others. And I think the Enlightened Leadership Applied methodology can serve as a good foundational basis for that approach, because at the core of the methodology, you would look at the ability to produce or generate the executive presence, which is the supporting element of the central competency of self-leadership. And that's definitely critical to the development of that self-leadership, because it helps project the level of priorities that you have to attend to, and be at the same time very conscious about what you're doing, when you're doing it, and how you can respond to that, as well as give you enough ammunition when you go into situations that lots of executives face on a daily basis, that sometimes the level of unpredictability and nature of those things that executives have to deal with, it definitely exceeds anybody's expectations, and sometimes in the negative sense. So therefore, if you're not present, if you're being disconnected from yourself, and you don't have the level of comfort at being in that connection with yourself, then you definitely have a whole raft of other risks to deal with. And if you start engaging in problem solving and decision making from the place of reactivity, it's going to bode not so good, not so well. So therefore, having the basics taken care of is a key requirement.
Yeah, I mean, that's really well said. I mean, and that's why in the middle of that enlightened leadership system applied model that I have, I recognize through the work with my clients that executive presence drives every other competency, every other ability to be clear, to set direction, to engage others, to build alignment, to follow through with sometimes courageous actions in the face of people screaming at you that you're doing the wrong thing and it's the right thing. It goes back to that self-authority and trusting yourself, which really, what are you trusting within yourself to stand on to make those decisions in those situations? And self-authority can be claimed in different ways. There is a way in which you can claim self-authority because you read it, fake it till you make it, or I've just got to show up and be confident and have the physical expression of confidence when I'm saying something and use the tone of my voice. And I'm not saying none of that is true, but it takes us away from the place for where self-authority is. And again, this is the trick of life. We haven't been told that seed of authority is within us. And it's not something we have to force upon others in an arrogant way. In fact, it's the opposite of that. It tends to soften us in a beautiful way, not make us soft, but to make us open to being present, to listen to people and see if they might have some ideas that we haven't thought of, for example, and to bring our team together and be creative together as a team and how we're operating. So it becomes as Bob Anderson says in his work, it becomes a creative endeavor rather than a reactive controlling endeavor, right? To do that. So do you think most executives understand that leading others effectively, and we're touching on this a little bit, requires that they know how to lead themselves, or has this been a central blind spot, do you think, in leadership development programs? Because we have there's I don't know the last time I looked at hundreds of thousands of books on leadership that tell you how to lead your teams and how to lead your organization and how to execute effectively. Have we missed that piece in a certain way in our leadership development programs?
Well, there's been definitely a bit of a mismatch because when you brought up the definition of that being a central blind spot, I think it's pretty much the case because it's very difficult to assist someone in a sort of like redefinition, journey, redefining their own journey and embracing things that sometimes operate outside of any curriculum offered, to business executives. So that could be definitely the case because most of executives seek some level of training and maybe induction to support their current views they espouse already. So therefore, they're not looking to get themselves transformed. So therefore, they're looking and shopping around for solutions that would support them in the way they are. And therefore, even if you bring things to them, like the ones we are covering right now, it may not resonate with them because they may say like, hey, being, a reactionary or being, sometimes seeking conflict as a way to reassert my authority is the only way, so I can, run roughshod over people who oppose me and all that. That's how I can ascertain my authority inside my organization. So what you are saying,
Yes.
It's like, well, it has to come from within. I have to start like some work on myself so I can reinvent myself. I'll have to transform myself. And I bring up that example. Okay. Since like I'm a karate buff, I'll just use an example here. There are two ways to go about doing that in the world of martial arts. One is a judo way, when you use the weaknesses of your opponent to win. Another one is a hard way, like a school of hard knocks. The karate, you just really persevere, you tough it all out. You just go regardless of all the bruises that you suffer on the way to get there. But if you look at that and you start thinking and accruing for all the pain you have suffered, is it really worth the pain? If you take a step back and you avoid an attack at the right time, you basically retain your physical integrity, right? You save your face, so to speak. So in a very figurative fashion, you may look at the situation with executive leadership. It's very similar because we've got some groups of leaders who actually seem to be enjoying this authoritarian style. But does it actually bring them a lot of joy? Does it bring them the level of accomplishment?
No.
If you look at that from the long-term perspective, I mean, hopping from one position to another, to avoid various gaps here and there. Yeah, it takes some talent, but still, it's much easier to invest in building something within so you can take it to the bank, literally speaking, because every day you show up, you're being consistent. And consistency these days is a very rare commodity because a lot of people prefer to lead in having a kind of a style that keeps everybody guessing because they're so unpredictable. But it doesn't really sustain a good and healthy environment in companies when their leaders act in a very unpredictable manner just to stay on top of the game. Much better when you have the organizational culture built around a leader who is predictable and who is consistent in anything they do on a daily basis. So I think that's how, looking at that would help some people understand the value of self-leadership from this perspective.
Yeah, I mean, and the way I look at it is, there's more information being created every 6 months now than has ever been created in time immemorial, right? So, if you imagine that you had bought this beautiful new house and somebody knew about the property and they said, I think somebody buried a treasure under that house. And I think it's probably worth about $20 million. And nobody's ever gone for it. I don't understand, but you may want to look into that. If you did your reconnaissance and realized that there was a treasure underneath your house, you would take the time to dig for that treasure, right? And versus go out and figure out where I could find $20 million out there, if venture cap, whatever. If I knew it was under my house, I don't want to dig under my house. It's just a lot easier. And that's what we're saying, that the treasure is within you. The challenge, I think, also is in, other parts of leadership development. And this is no bashing anybody. I think everybody's recognized that. People that are more spiritually astute, if you will, know that that's true from their perspective. But then you try to teach that same methodology, meditation or whatever it is, deep esoteric practices, however you reform those into a corporate speak that makes me it gets lost in translation. Executives don't necessarily want anything to do with it because it seems a little bit out there. And what I like about what we do in what my quest has been for 24 years is to make that practical, to make it accessible. So now that we've defined kind of what self-leadership is, let's talk a little bit about what's required to develop it in that practical manner. Now, clearly, if an executive engages the leadership resilience reset, they have a leg up on their development in self-leadership. And we've seen that self-authority, you mentioned that earlier, is one of the strongest things that come to people after the reset. I just feel more in touch with my confidence. I'm not arrogant, but I'm able to stay present and be with people in a certain way and not be worried about things. So that's happening. Yet I also want to talk about some key practices and methods outside of that are most potent for a leader who wants to strengthen self-leadership. So any thoughts you have on that? Like if you were to say, okay, you're not ready for the leadership resilience reset. You're not ready for a quick, easy way to do it. But you want to begin to develop that in yourself. What is the keys to developing self-leadership or discovering that treasure that you have within yourself?
Well, the word has it like there are lots of different practices. And if you sort of look at this from the body-mind connection, then of course, there are some like old school, like of doing yoga, doing meditation, unfortunately, it's an investment that will bear fruit like years after you invest in this, So, however, it's still better than nothing. But one thing I would like to single out, which is very easy, very quick and dirty, thing, is to embrace such a practice as self-reflection. I know that people don't have time for that, but self-reflection puts you in touch with how you see yourself based on your own existing mechanism before you actually undergo any change, But at the same time, if you start embracing some transformative practices, it will help you measure what you're going through and see how much progress you're making. Not many think that, actually, let's call a spade a spade. A lot of people think that they just don't have time for self-reflection, like, journaling or, keeping tabs on things they do on a regular basis and then reflecting them, like, that's usually recommended, like 5 minutes before you go to bed, you kind of quickly run through the, events you had, and then to make sure that, you get pretty much a good idea of what issues you had and how you could fix it the following day. Well, yeah, but of course it's very, very basic and it will not, generate results needed. But the level of self-reflection is definitely important because it's going to put you on a trajectory to go towards two important things that we're going to be talking about is self-care and self-efficacy. Because these are rarely talked about, because self-care and self-efficacy is more like, how you can hold yourself accountable before yourself for the stuff you do for yourself. And how you do that, how productive you are doing that. So this is, I'm sort of like taking a step away from existing practices of, mindfulness and meditation and all, what have you. But a lot of people, especially executives, they like some foundational principles. Why am I to do what I'm supposed to do? And if you tell them, like, look, if you sweep the idea of self-care under the rug, and under the carpet, you don't want to address that because, hey, I'm healthy, I'm running the show, nothing can happen to me, I feel like I'm invincible. right?
Yeah,
This is a recipe for disaster, because things catch up with us when we least expect it. Because physiologically, so especially if we're dealing with a lot of stress, we have very little as an idea as to when and how we become impacted by the amount of stress we have to put up with, right? And then, but the concept of self-efficacy is more telling. Am I applying myself to the best of my ability given the circumstances I'm having? Am I doing, because you see, sometimes people tend to think and reflect more in the intellectual sense. I can always figure out something. I can talk my way through out of any situation. I can always find a way to do something, right? But truth to be told, if it all exists in some sort of a mental or intellectual bubble outside of our physical body, it's a fallacy, because anything we do has impact on our physical body, and in the type of like psychosomatic, illnesses and various disorders that we develop when we deal with the level of stress we are not prepared for. Okay, so addressing that, from that perspective is important. Why? Because anything you do at that level for yourself will be seen by others. Because investing in yourself, it could be supported by others because they would like that positive development in you and be more supportive of it, which means like you no longer have to focus inwardly to sustain that process within you. You will be getting help from other people around you. Yeah. And it's talked about a lot about a growth mindset, how important that is. Well, let's put it this way. If you embark on a learning process about yourself before you learn anything else, that's going to bring some dividends that you sometimes may look back and marvel at. How come I never really tried to do that before?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I think, in a lot of what you're pointing to in the self-reflection piece, and even in self-care, is to me what are these practices intending to develop? So we all know that, and that the core thing and why executive presence is in the center of my model is because self-awareness and the ability to strengthen and expand one's self-awareness leads to an ability to direct and focus one's attention. Now, to me, how I'm as an executive directing my attention has everything, and I'm saying everything, capital letters, to do with my impact. If my attention is all over the place, or I'm being pulled in multiple different directions by other people's strong opinions about things, I'm toast in my role. So at the level of self-leadership, our attention, must be squarely on, why I'm showing up every day to work, what my purpose is, what my brand of leadership is that I want to express, and what I care about most. And when we don't, and if those things don't roll off our tongues, and I don't mean just like you're memorizing them, we have there's a risk that our attention is going to be taken by events and others and get us off our game. So, and I think the other area to me is how we interact with others. So whatever you can do to improve your ability to have high value conversations with others. Because as I talk to executives, I said, what are you ultimately paid for when you get to a VP level or above? I mean, director is a mix. You're still kind of doing stuff. But when you get to VP and above, you're paid to have conversations fundamentally. And those conversations are meant to create commitments to forward execution. So if you are sloppy and, I'll just be, like you said, I'll just be effervescent, I'll just be myself, I'll figure out how to charm my way through, again, that's lazy, bottom line. And it's not going to produce the results you want, So, and there is something about the growth mindset, but it is about, you can do growth mindset in one or two ways. You could do growth mindset because, I got to get better, and every day I got to lift my weights, and it's like I got to get to the gym, I got to do my stuff. which tends to not last very long. It's kind of like the New Year's resolution growth mindset. It goes away over time. But when you genuinely look at what, it goes back to self-reflection, when you genuinely get connected to what you care about, and then you set the intention to see if you can manifest that, there becomes a joy in the learning process and the self-reflective process. You want to step back and look, how did I do today with my intention? Not because some coach gave me the exercise to do, but because I'm curious how I can be more effective in bringing myself forward to lead, and to see where maybe an aspect of myself came in and was reactive in that conversation with Sue. And now I can see the look on her face that I didn't see earlier today, and I need to go back and apologize. There's simple things like that. Or I may have had there was an idea at a meeting that came up that I didn't listen to, but when I reflect back, Joe brought something up, I need to follow back up with him. So there's things that we can't do in the moment sometimes that self-reflection and stepping back enables us to do. So, this is another interesting area that kind of feels like a bit of a diversion, but it really isn't, because it has to do with what we're helping people deal with in their roles through the reset and the coaching that follows. We assume that everybody in the executive suite shares a similar desire to move things forward for the greater good, right? But this is not the case, at least for 20% of the executive population. For example, there's a decent percentage of neuroatypical executives in the workforce who are narcissistic, psychopathic, and sociopathic. I know this is to be interesting. And such individuals have no interest in consciously developing their self-leadership. They don't give, I won't say, and how prevalent is this in organizations? So I did some research. Simon Crome, a professor of research who does supply chain management program at the University of San Diego School of Business, wrote in Fortune in 2021 that he and his colleagues found that 12% of the corporate senior leaders display some range of psychopathic traits. That's leaving out narcissism and sociopath, right? So it's leaving out another portion of that. Means that psychopathy is up to 12 times more common in the senior management population than the general population. And oh, by the way, in prisons, it's 15% of the population. So Anatoly, what do you have to say to that? And what mentally healthy executives can do to deal with and compete with that? Because I'm bringing this up because it has to do with self-leadership. If you are not doing your work to develop as a self-leadership and you run into some of these characters, you don't really stand a chance, do you? So any thoughts on that?
Well, let's start with this. Yes, it's true that the closer you get to that executive level, the higher is the probability that you will run into those neurodivergent individuals. And but let's put it this way: sometimes for the business, it's good when you have a psychopath who can steer your ship through stormy waters of unpredictable events. Why? Because they will never lose their cool. Okay, but even in case you're ready to put up with their quirky behavior, so to speak, so that's one small positive element. Somehow in certain professions, it's not that bad, because you'd rather be operated on by a surgeon who's got some psychopathic tendencies, because he will be more precise, undeterred, and most likely to deal with unlikely situations that are to occur. In case they occur, we'll deal with that coldly in the most efficient manner. However, we're talking about also a level of narcissism, which is of a rather malevolent category, creating toxic environments and disengaging people. So, my recommendation would not be like, well, try to find a way to work with them because you may find something. Why? Because normally narcissists prefer people to get broken first. Yeah. If you don't get broken, you don't fit. Therefore, I mean, like, imagine, like, okay, would you rather allow yourself to be broken and molded in a way that you don't really want to enjoy? So yeah, so that's not the case. I have worked, by the way, interestingly enough, I worked and I was supported by three narcissists before, but I was supported for a different reason. Because they said, well, Anatoly, we can't find an angle on you. We can't break you down. We can't do anything to you, but we enjoy being around you. And the fact that we don't enjoy being around anybody, kind of intrigued. Why is that we're okay with you? But I would not recommend that because it's just a quirky, situation, right? For the most part, when you deal with people that come from that dark realm, it bodes not well, for people to be working with them. The best path is to retract and, find a different way of applying your talent. Because if you could ask any shrink who would say, you know what, up to date, we have not come up with anything to help reform a narcissist. So there is nothing out there. There are no tricks up anyone's sleeve to actually introduce any way of alleviating that condition, just because it comes as it comes. And that's unfortunately something that people have to decide for themselves what to do with it. I have tried to work with narcissists before. It was to a very varying degree, so I cannot really say that I can do something to change, to an extent that it would be something to report to. So therefore, it still stands where it stands. Stands remaining that challenging state, and so far nothing has been provided as an antidote.
Right. Well, I mean, I think of all three, I mean, you pointed to this psychopath and sociopaths may be in certain situations very effective people, but we haven't figured out where narcissists add value. And I've had two executives who had to deal with a boss and a co-owner who are highly narcissistic. And it took the whole team to realize that and build a strategy to get them the heck out of Dodge and how to do that. And it was there had to be a lot of strategy and caution and, we don't want to create a legal issue. It's very challenging when you have, and I think they're the more challenging to deal with. But one thing I do notice that, and this is not necessarily, well, it is part of the reset, that there's a certain thing that happens when you do in the reset you see, and certainly I think when you get connected to self-leadership, that you are able to weather those storms more effectively and maybe not overreact to the person, because overreacting sometimes is the worst thing you can do, right? But figure out a way around those things. And I just thought I'd bring that up because it's an interesting topic that you see organizations have, because, all three of those types are very charming in interviews. They can be very, boards sometimes love them when they interview them because we're going to come in, I'm going to take care of business, we're going to handle everything, and they believe them. So it was an interesting thought I had. So, we talked about most executives don't have time to develop self-leadership, and it's not prioritized for them. And I don't know what you do other than try to inspire or ignite that in them some way. But do you think is there anything that can be said to somebody that's not budging on that? And maybe we pointed to it with the treasure and maybe that's a good metaphor for it. Is there anything else you'd like to say about what, you can do to say this is something valuable to focus on, or is that wasted air? I don't know.
Well, you can talk about the fact that everybody's got enough treasures, scattered around the place. You just have to dig at the right spot. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, people normally take it like, look, I don't know where to look. I don't know how much time I need to invest. Now, I don't know if maybe I will find one gold coin. It will not be worth much. It will not be worth time and effort, right? So, but I'd focus on something different here. Sometimes you start saying, look, okay, you don't have to look you can remain, keep your old self, but look at the level of challenges that are being mounted on you. Every day, the adversity and the level of unpredictability grows exponentially. So if you have your old self with old wounds, unaddressed issues, unprocessed, not transformed, you will find yourself pretty soon under so much pressure that those cracks will begin to appear. And
Right.
then, just because of the sheer onslaught of those challenges, you will be forced to look within and start looking for a way, for ways to upgrade yourself to be able to deal with those challenges. I think when we're talking about this, we don't have to talk about anything specifically or anything special here. It's just the sheer nature in life of every executive these days is that amount of growing pressure that on them, both externally and internally, will create the level of pressure on them that they will have to look deep inside and see if I can dig out anything that will help me weather another day. And I think, that's what probably is pushing a lot of people to start, embracing some, meditative practices and start looking for ways how they can shore up themselves because they know they're groaning under that pressures, those pressures. And they know that there is nothing they can do because they are out of time. They just don't have anything else that they can do to prop themselves up. So therefore, it's almost like they're supposed to throw in a towel and say, okay, let's go back to that story you told me that I've got some treasures in me. Okay, I think I'm ready, because if I don't find anything, I'm ready to keel over and the show's over.
Right, right. Well, that's true. I do believe that why we didn't know what was going to happen post-COVID with coaching. Coaching has gone through another boom in a certain way because executives are looking for, and at least they can spend an hour a week with somebody stepping back from the fray. Of course, I don't let them only spend an hour. I hold their feet to the fire to do more. But that then you have somebody you're accountable to do some of the work, the meditative practices and the reflections and the considerations you have about your team that you haven't had time to look at, but the coach is forcing you to look at those things, which ends up serving you. So that's another way that can happen. But because executives are so pressed for time, they're always looking for shortcuts and silver bullet solutions, right? And after all, if an executive can save months or years to get the highest level result, they're all ears. So how does the resilient leader method align with those expectations? And we could just recapping maybe something we talked about on the show at the beginning of the year, but how does that how does that align with those expectations of an executive looking for something like that?
Well, let's first look at the nature of those claims, because technically speaking, because people are really have been mined, to the core in terms of their attention, their emotions, their intellectual capacity. Everybody's, stretched, taught, unable to focus beyond the capacity they have. So therefore, comes the situation when they say, look, I've got an attention span of a golden fish. If you want to break something, and give something to me to process, it has to be done under 1 minute, so I can see, all the benefits, and it should be for free, and it should be done without me investing in a minute of my time. I know you may say, like, it doesn't make any sense to have those ludicrous claims, but unfortunately, because of it's in our character, since we have to deal with so much, that we over time grow that state of entitlement. We are entitled to get a bit of a shortcut here. Why? Because it's too much we have to deal with. So cut me some slack. Give me a silver bullet. There's got to be a shortcut. There's got to be a way. So people look for that as a way of getting that instant gratification, because they think I deserve to be cut some slack. So, and then when we start talking about that, we say, okay, the resilient, leadership method, basically aligns with that level of expectations in a way. Why? Because technically speaking, the format in which, the reset is delivered is just storytelling. You don't have to do anything. All the work will be done with you, David, right after to integrate all the things they would get, but it still takes a leap of faith. It's a small thing
Yes.
though. It's still a small thing, but like, hey, do you have courage to sit through 1 hour of a storytelling?
Yeah, and I'm going to say, I've been going back and interviewing our clients about the value, and I said, well, because this was I was asking a lot of you to assume that the 2 1 hour conversations could have done what I was promising. And he said, well, listen, what alleviated my concerns is that you weren't doing anything, you weren't changing anything about me that I didn't want to change. You weren't, this was going to do no harm, right? The investment at the worst case scenario, I would have gotten no ROI, but I would have had no harm done to me. That's a low bar, right? But and then that's true. And the others to say the promise of it was compelling. And now, because we have a track record with close to 20 people doing this, we have people that are reinforcing that for people that now want to go through the process. So it is a leap of faith. But given the times we are in, and given the stakes that we're under, and given the credibility that you have developed in your career and I've developed in my career, it gives people. It makes it easier for people to make that leap of faith. And so I appreciate you saying all that. And I want to speak to the people a lot of people that have done the reset now listen to these podcasts on a regular basis. So I thought it'd be an opportunity I know that you said that continued self-development is critically important, even for those who've been through the resilient reset process. And that's part of the reason why we recognize that coaching had to be added. And at first blush, that can surprise people. Well, you told me to reset. I'm all changed. I don't have to worry about it. It increases my energy, my focus, my creativity, my confidence, my resilience. And doesn't it just continue on? So I say that it opens a door for much more within you if you do something with it, right? Well, what do you say about why you believe, because we just said it's hard to find the time and the space and, all that stuff. But what makes continued self-development so important even after the reset?
Well, let's start with this. We have to deal with the fact that our minds usually, once anything of transformative nature start budding inside, our minds actually, and the level of psychological resistance to that flies through the roof. Why? Because our belief systems, it just really strives to maintain that level of status quo and actually prevent any personality, personal identity crisis from occurring. Why? Because as you start transforming from inside out, then your personality changes to allow more room for new boosts of creativity, energy, focus, resilience, and what have you, right? So therefore, it's going to affect your personal projection of what your personality is. Now, you cannot integrate those changes on your own because you're dealing with the mental resistance, you're dealing with the identity crisis, you're not equipped to be your own shrink. So therefore, you're working with you as a coach, generate tremendous value to point you in the right direction, to address things that occur, and also, this is the best part, to integrate all those beneficial changes in a way that would be the most supportive for you in your current role. Okay. That's why, well, you and I know we had some instances of people who've gone through reset and kind of like sprang off and being kind of
never to be heard from again.
Well, we kind of like realized that the person would be slightly unhinged because, sometimes you don't know. You suddenly wake up and you have too much energy, you have too much of everything, know how to integrate it all, right? So people start like really, shopping around, like, okay, how do I stay on top of all of this? But since you don't have the internal mechanism for that, you definitely need the support that can only come under the guise of executive coaching practice that has been established specifically to support those rapid gains.
Right.
And that's why I think it's so key.
Yeah, I mean, going back to the metaphor of the treasure underneath your house, it's like we open the first level of the $1 million, and we also show you the doorway to the rest of the money. So, and yet you have to put effort in. And this is what I realized after my reset. There were things that I was letting certain sleeping dogs lie within myself. And there is this thing about the magic and the power of the reset, but there's also you taking personal responsibility for making sure you get everything out of that investment that you got, because you are a lucky one. There's not many people in the world that have all of a sudden access to this depth in themselves without doing years of meditation, without doing mindfulness activity after mindfulness activity, or going on retreats or whatever they do. You've had something open up into you, gratis in a certain way, and it freely. And so it's kind of like getting a taste of something and not eating the whole meal. Like, getting one little piece of steak or sushi, and that's it. We're not, that's all you get. But no, you can have the whole meal. So I think it's really important for us to say that it really opens a doorway to greater possibilities. So I appreciate that. Anything else as we kind of close out the show today? Any other final words you want to say about what we've talked about, or to tie a bow on this for you today?
Yeah, I wanted to touch also on another aspect, which is like, just a primitive thing from the, realm of psychology, so to speak. I think part of the, problem comes from the fact that when people say like, oh, all I have to do is to sit through some storytelling, makes them feel like, oh, I can like throw it away, right? Because, okay, I got it in that easy manner. I didn't have to sweat blood, making this thing become part of me. So people tend to unfortunately treat, but by the way, here's the conundrum. People cry out for a silver bullet solution. They get something really easy, and because it's so easy, they don't want to respect it, even if it brings them all the.
They take the work,
Exactly. So I would like to caution and kind of dwell on that, because saying that it's interesting. So people feel like they're entitled to a very simple yet powerful solution, but if it's very simple, they really tend not to respect that. But however, the idea is getting the right level of coaching around those challenging items is absolutely key. But like I want to like really kind of wrap it up here from this perspective. Okay, so the reset comes as a storytelling, which is essentially self-healing, the instant neuroplasticity to help you address what you already have inside. Okay, so that's one thing. And the second format, which is very well established, is the executive coaching that you can trust that it will support you in the best fashion going forward. So I think if you look at those two elements being presented, not in a very exotic format, but in a rather very straightforward and familiar formats, that could make it a bit more appealing for people who contemplate that.
Yeah. And another metaphor I think is like cashing in your stock before it's fully vetted. It's kind of like you're cashing in your stock before it's fully vetted. You haven't vetted the stock. So, well, thank you, Anatoly, for taking the time today. It's always a delight for us to get together and talk. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining today. Again, if you find these podcasts insightful and inspiring, please share them with those in your network who want to be more effective and resilient leaders. Also, if you have any feedback for me or suggestions for future topics or guests, feel free to email me at david@davidcraigutz.com and share your suggestions with me. So thanks again, Anatoly, for joining today. It was really great to have you.
Thank you, David. It's been a pleasure.
And to everybody else out there, have a great rest of your day. This is David Craig Utz, the Resilient Leadership Guy, signing off. Until next time, have a great day.